If you are a Christian, you need to have boundaries in your life. I feel like so often boundaries are seen as a bad thing, and people think that, you can't just cut people off or remove people from your life after they do one thing wrong or a million things wrong, and there's so much divide and confusion and just so many different opinions. So in today's video, I want to talk about what the Lord has taught me about setting boundaries as a Christian, because this is something that I've definitely had to learn and relearn in my walk with the Lord. And so if you guys have never seen one of my videos, my name is Sophia and I just make videos about the Bible and walking with the Lord. And so obviously this video is going to be about boundaries. So if you guys are interested, make sure to like, comment, subscribe, and just keep watching the rest of this video. And so I have been on both sides of this debate. I've been the person who puts up with a billion things from somebody, and I've been someone who cuts somebody off after they do one thing. And again, I'm working on my testimony video where my vague stories will someday make sense, but unfortunately for me, when it comes to setting boundaries, in the past it always came down to how close I was with that person, and I wasn't really fully impartial. And as I grew in my walk with the Lord started to remove people from my life or challenge me to remove them. And I am a firm believer that if somebody doesn't bring you peace, or their character or who they are disrupts your relationship with the Lord, they don't need to have access to you. I feel like a big part of boundaries relates to fearing people more than we fear the Lord. And I feel like oftentimes we don't set boundaries because we're people pleasing, and sometimes people disguise doing the right Christian thing and it's just people pleasing, and they don't set those boundaries that they need to. And I know that from Galatians 1:10 it says, am I now trying to win the approval of human beings or of God? Or am I trying to please people? If I were still trying to please people, I would not be a servant of Christ. So I once knew somebody who wanted to remove somebody from their life, and the reasoning was for good reason. It was a bad relationship, and she wanted to focus on God, but she didn't remove him from her social media, and so he would reach out to her and it would make her upset. And when people would ask her, like, why don't you just block him, or why don't you do this, or why don't you do that, she would say like, oh well, I don't want to be mean. And so this becomes a problem, one, because you're fearing him and people more than you're fearing the Lord, and two, you're creeping back and leaving the door opened for something that the Lord removed in your life. Not trying to be mean is a disguise sometimes for people pleasing, which is a sin, and it is a lack of strength in what the Lord told you to do. And I feel like we have to have a sober judgment of ourselves and really ask ourselves who and what we are serving by not setting those boundaries. I have two short stories that I want to mention and explain what the Lord taught me through setting boundaries. So there was a time in my life where I was around somebody I should have never been around, and I knew that it was time to just separate, go our own ways. And so I did that, but this person wanted to stay in contact, wanted to text and call, and I had wised up at this point and I said no. And that, created some hurt feelings. But, and the thing is that I wanted to stay in contact too. But the thing is that that sounds mean, right? But if you think that being nice and being a doormat is what being a Christian means, then you have been misled. Because God tells us to be strong and courageous. If somebody gets in the way of you serving God, or the way that you view yourself and value yourself, then you need to set a limit on that person. Bad company corrupts good character. Because say I had stayed in contact with this person and done the nice thing, I would have been directly disobeying God, disrespecting myself, and letting this person become an idol or something I feared. When we know that the only idol we should have is God, and the only thing that we should fear is God. So God doesn't want that for you, because this person had caused me so much pain, and I knew that God didn't want that for me. And I tell this story to explain two things. One being that people are always going to have a problem with you setting boundaries, whether they're big or small, and that is not your fault if that's what God called you to do. And secondly, sometimes you can tell a lot about a person when you set those boundaries. Now, say that you're setting a boundary in terms of it's not completely cutting that person off, it's just distancing yourself from that person, which is not wrong. I once was significantly hurt by my friend, or at the time was my friend, and I would literally get on Instagram. Even seeing their name, their picture, I would get so upset. I'd start crying. I would get this pit in my stomach, and I ended up fasting from Instagram. And I'm not saying that Instagram is good and that we should be on Instagram, but it wasn't Instagram's fault that I was getting upset. And my point is that it was this person who was making me upset. And I didn't want to remove them because I thought that it would create drama and gossip, and it did. But the reality is that if somebody is going to disrespect you when you start moving or living your life differently, then that is their problem and that's on them. And the other thing that I like to remind myself of, or other people when they come to me with these types of things, is that if you're setting boundaries with somebody, 99% of the time, it's because of something they did. It's not for no reason. And you are allowed to respond to choices that people make if they're hurting you. You're allowed to respond to that. And that is not your problem anymore if you're trying to protect yourself, protect the temple of the Holy Spirit. Like, you are protecting yourself by setting these boundaries. And if you feel the need, you can even express that to the other person if you want, and if you really feel the need to explain. And it just doesn't need to be made into a big war when you remove somebody from your life or just distance yourself from their life. It can simply be like, I need a break from this right now just because of what happened, but I wish you the best. It's that simple. If somebody makes it more complicated than that, then that's not your problem. Psalm 118 verse 6 says, "What can mere mortals do to me? The Lord is with me, I will not be afraid." You can't be focusing so much on how somebody is going to react to the things that you do. If, again, I say this assuming that everybody is doing the right thing and they were wronged by somebody else. If that is the case, then you are allowed to have a different perspective and distance yourself from those people. I feel like I know so many people who just put up with so much disrespect and abuse from people, and I used to too, but I just don't anymore because it is literally never worth it. And I also, really quickly, I want to address something that I've been thinking about, and I actually got a comment about a while ago. I had somebody comment and they asked, at what point does it become running from your problems? Which is an amazing question, because I was talking about something similar to this, about like distancing yourself from people, and somebody said, I think it was me quitting my job, and somebody said like, at what point does it become running from your problems? And that is actually a really good question. So I thought about it for so long, and I feel like I have an answer now. And so here's what I think. It's different for everybody, but I think that sometimes we can be afraid to work through things with people and solve problems with people, and we might just think that we have to cut everybody off, and that is not true. That is not my point in any of my videos. I just have done that in the past because that was what was right, but that's honestly not what's always right to do. I think to answer the question, we have to ask ourselves why we are trying to work through something with somebody versus not willing to work through something. And so when we are asking ourselves that question, we have to be very self-aware in terms of, one, what does the Lord want me to do? And two, am I trying to people please? And three, am I fearing God alone and not anyone else? Because I feel like sometimes there's this misconception that we have to fear God more than we fear anything else. And I actually just don't agree with that. I think that we should fear God and nothing else. Not more than we fear other things. I think that we should only fear God. And doing that has literally changed my life for the better, because it is a command from God. And so, back to the point. I have had friends in the past where we were able to work through things and reconcile differences, not because I was trying to people please and not because I was trying to, fear them more than I feared God, but simply because it was not some great sin against me. If it is a huge sin against you, which has happened to me before, sometimes you just gotta leave those people alone and get away from them, because I don't like the idea of reconciling certain things, and sometimes things you just can't. And so, okay, I got ahead of myself on my notes, but yeah, so there was a time in my life where, at the time it was my best friend actually, I was incredibly close to this person, and she did one main thing, but a lot of bad things that were absolutely horrible and shocking to me. And the thing is that I was biased. I wanted to stay friends with this person even after everything that happened, and like, I loved this, she was my best friend, like I loved her, I wanted to work it out. And biblically, when we're walking in wisdom, which I wasn't at the time, but if I was, I should have completely removed that person from my life immediately when it happened. Because the thing is that, one main big bad thing and then another, and like an apology, I'll never do that again. And it was like, okay. And then it just keeps happening because just some things you just can't reconcile, and that is okay. And yeah, I wanted to figure it out, but things just got worse, and I never felt peace about the situation, and I literally thought about it for months and tried to reconcile it for months. But what I was always thinking about was what happened, the betrayal, and I wasn't thinking about what God wanted me to do. And so I realized that I was wanting to do what I selfishly wanted rather than to look at the reality of the situation. And what I want to say is that everything can be forgiven, but not everything can be reconciled. And that's something that we need to remember. Sometimes you need to look at the reality of a situation rather than following your heart, because the Bible tells us that the heart is deceitful above all things. Romans 12:3 tells us to think of ourselves with sober judgment. It is vital that we analyze our true intentions when it comes to boundary setting. If somebody is negatively affecting our relationship with the Lord, or leading us to become something we don't want to become, or saying things we don't want to say, we have to set boundaries with those people. And yes, we are meant to put others above ourselves, but never put those people above the Lord, which I feel like is the big misconception. And it is a command from the Lord. Jesus himself walked away a lot. We see it particularly in Matthew 15 and Matthew 16. And in Matthew 10, Jesus instructs his disciples to walk away if they're not welcomed or listened to. And truly, sometimes the most loving and biblical and obedient approach is to walk away and set boundaries. Let go of this idea that being a good Christian and loving like Jesus means letting people walk all over you, because it never says that in the Bible. And so, yeah, I mainly just wanted to talk about in this video, but really just explain why we need to ask ourselves these questions about why we're not setting boundaries. And because I know for me, it usually came from trying to do the right Christian thing, and that's just disguised as people pleasing and fearing people. And sometimes the most biblical thing to do is to set boundaries. And so I really hope that this video spoke to somebody and maybe challenged you to view a situation in your life with a refreshed perspective. And so yeah, I really hope this video helps somebody. If you guys enjoyed it, make sure to like, comment, and subscribe. And in the comments, leave prayer requests and I'll get back to you and be praying for you. And so yeah, I just wish you all a great rest of your day.